So during this past week's Bible study, I had someone in my group request that I speak on John 15. John 15 is the parable of the vine and the branches. Quick notation: God is the gardener, Jesus is the vine, we are the branches, and the fruits of the Spirit will be the results. God is the gardener, therefore he gives us the nourishment that we need through the vine into the branches for us to produce positive results. Love, joy, peace, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. The next day I had someone in my group request for me to speak on the book of Ruth. So then I thought about how I was going to do this, because I had two people request in the same week what we should speak about in Bible study. So God had given me a thought: since I'm going to go into the true context of the fruits of the Spirit, maybe I can use Ruth as an example. So I had come to realize that a lot of people speak on the book of Ruth as a love story, the love story between Ruth and Boaz. However, when you look into it into true and deeper context in the Bible, it is so much deeper than a love story between a man and a woman. There was the love connection between Boaz, Ruth, and Naomi, and the love of God. That would be obvious, but you could look past it if you have the intent of looking at it as a love story between man and woman. The book of Ruth basically starts with Naomi. Naomi has two sons named Mahlon and Chilion. Ruth was married to Mahlon. Her other daughter-in-law, Oprah, was married to Chilion. Naomi ended up losing her husband and her two sons, but she ended up staying with her daughter-in-law. So once Naomi learned that the famine in Bethlehem was over, she wanted to return home. However, she did not want to bring her two daughter-in-laws along because she had no other kin for them to marry. Oprah returned back to her people, but Ruth decided to stay with her mother-in-law. Ruth 1:19. So the two women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them, and the women exclaimed, "Can this be Naomi?" "Don't call me Naomi," she told them. "Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me." So here we learn that Naomi felt the void that God created in her life from taking her sons and her husband away from her. Naomi felt bitter, she felt empty, and she felt abandoned by the Lord, to the point she felt that he brought her misfortune. So now Naomi and Ruth are in Bethlehem. Ruth decides to go out into the fields to pick up the leftover grain from the fields after the harvesters, in whichever field that she would find favor in. As it turns out, Ruth ends up working in the field owned by Boaz. At the start of Ruth chapter 2, it states that Boaz is the kin of Naomi's deceased husband. When Boaz returns to his field, he asks his harvesters, who is this woman working in his field. His harvesters basically tell him this is Ruth. Ruth is the daughter-in-law of Naomi. Now, Naomi is from Bethlehem, so they know her already. However, Ruth is now known in the town for being the woman who has taken good care and putting good works behind her mother-in-law. Boaz finds favor in Ruth for doing the good works that she has for Naomi. Ruth chapter 2, verse 8. So Boaz said to Ruth, "My daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with my servant girls. Watch the field where the men are harvesting and follow along after the girls. I have told the men not to touch you, and whenever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled." In verse 11, it says, Boaz replied, "I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother in your homeland and came to live with the people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Multiple times throughout these passages, God is foretelling the future for these characters. In that last passage, Boaz has already spoke on the upcoming blessings that Ruth will receive from the Lord. Even in Naomi's complaint about God, she has basically already foretold what he would do for her ahead of time. Ruth even foretells her own self in 13. "May I continue to find favor in your eyes, my Lord," she said. "You have given me comfort and have spoken kindly to your servant, though I do not have the standing of your servant girls." Ruth went home and told Naomi about the favor that the man had showed her in the field. Chapter 2, verse 20, it says, "The Lord bless him. Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, he has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead." She added that the man is our close relative. He is our kinsman redeemer. Naomi told Ruth to go out into the threshing floor where Boaz will be working. And basically once his shift had ended, once he is full and filled with joy, he will lay down for his nap. And once he lay down, to lay at the base of his feet. So basically this was Ruth shooting her shot at Boaz. Now, the shift in the story was that Boaz was actually not the next of kin. There was another cousin in the picture as well. So Boaz basically gathered all the wise men and his cousin and came to him and basically gave him a proposal. Naomi is selling her land, but it comes along with Ruth, and in doing so, you have to take on the last name. Basically, the next of kin was like, I can't do that due to the real estate he already had himself. So he told Boaz, you do it. So now Boaz has been blessed with the land of his kin and Ruth as his wife. So the true love story would not be the love story between Ruth and Boaz. The true love story will be the triangular relationship between the three with God in the center. Ruth chapter 4:13. So Boaz took Ruth and she became his wife. Then he went to her and the Lord enabled her to conceive and she gave birth to a son. The women said to Naomi, praise be the Lord who this day has not left you without a kinsman redeemer. Looking into the true context of this story, if you relate it back to the fruits of the Spirit, due to Ruth's faithfulness to her mother-in-law Naomi and her deceased husband, she was able to obtain land, her husband, and new family who would now be of royalty. So Ruth's son and Naomi's grandson would now be the father of Jesse. Jesse was the father of King David, the King David, David and Goliath David, who would later on also be the king of Jesus Christ himself. So the whole time what Naomi felt like God had taken away from her, he had already given to her well before she had ever went without her sons and her husband. Before the void was ever created, the thing that would fill her void was always there. Boaz was born for this purpose, and the unity between Ruth and Milan was actually for the long-term commitment of Ruth and Boaz, as crazy as that may seem. Naomi always had her kinsman redeemer. And due to the fruits of the Spirit between Boaz and Ruth, they were able to produce the unity between each other. It was just very funny to me that people concentrated on the love story between Boaz and Ruth when the true love story was the triangular relationship with God being in the center between the three characters in this story. Even in the story itself in the book of Ruth, the marriage, the unity between Boaz and Ruth are very short in comparison to Naomi's story. The story was really about Naomi. This book should really be called Naomi. The relationship that she had between God and the commitment that Ruth made to her through the fruits of the Spirit. God being the gardener, Jesus being the vine, us being the branches, and the fruits of the Spirit being the production, the produce, the results. John chapter 15 states, I am the true vine and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that bears fruit he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. So because of the fruits that Naomi, Boaz, and Ruth already bared, they were able to bear more fruit. That is the true love story found in the book of Ruth.